Zeapon has made some of my favorite sliders over the past couple of years. Sliders that I have used on several commercial jobs, to enhance my interview setups, or to shoot amazing product b-roll for this YouTube channel. So I was naturally excited when they've announced their Zeapon Micro 3 slider series and all the improvements that came along with it. But does the new and improved slider live up to its hype? Let's find out. My name is Damien and welcome to my channel. The Zeapon Micro 3 comes in 3 different sizes, the M500, M700 and M1000. And with its double distance slider technique, it makes it a lot easier to travel with it because of its smaller footprint. The Zeapon Micro 3 now comes in a black and grey finish. It holds a bigger mounting plate and it also features more mounting options on the bottom of the slider. Aside from our middle screws, we now have one more attachment point on either side of the gimbal. This way we can mount it to light stands, but it's also easier for car mount rigs or to mount it in reverse if you want to have the slider upside down. The biggest design though is the detachable motor unit, because now we can easily go from a manual to a motorized slider within seconds. There's only 2 mounting points that you have to unscrew with your fingers, and then in a matter of seconds you can detach the entire motor unit, and now you have a fully manual slider. To make the most out of our now manual slider, we have a new dampening system with 5 different strength levels. Here you have to note that all 5 levels are still pretty strong and there's a lot of resistance here, which makes traveling from left to right a little bit harder, but it makes for a lot smoother camera movements opposed to a very loose belt. The Zeapon Micro 3, H36, that's when I decided to get braces. Which might be a big improvement for what my teeth will look like in the very near future, but it definitely comes at a loss for all the TH sounds, which are very hard for me right now, which is going to be fun for a Zeapon Micro 3 review. So bear with me. The slider comes in a nice carrying bag and 2 arms to attach to your tripod to make the entire system a little bit sturdier. Here's to note that the arms actually help you with your tripod head, but not so with the tipping over of the tripod itself. And here I really highly recommend to have a really sturdy tripod, because I had video tripods that were on the verge of tipping over and it's a little bit disguised because of the double distance slider technique. If you have a somewhat heavy camera setup and you travel to the side of the motor, then there is a lot of strain and weight on your tripod, so it might tip over altogether. So again, be sure to have a really nice and sturdy tripod. I'm using my Sachtler Flowtech and that has been an absolute breeze to work with the slider, and I have no fear of it tipping over. But then again, this is a really expensive tripod. On the motor unit itself we have a handful of buttons, and those are mostly self-explanatory. We can turn on the slider, we can turn it off, we can change the speed, we can move it left and right, and by double clicking we can go automatically all the way to either side of the slider. But now the motor unit also implements a lot more than this, because now you can actually program loops and ins and out points via the motor unit itself, and you don't have to use the app. Which works, and it's a little bit cumbersome for my taste, so I would always use the app, but I will talk about the app a little bit later. But if you don't want to use an app at all, then you can always manually program a loop and an in and an out point on the motor unit itself. You can use the Zeapon Micro 3 either horizontally or even vertically, and it is designed for a payload of 4 kilograms when using it vertically and up to 12 kilograms when using it horizontally. I have used the Zeapon Micro 3 with different kind of camera setups. The lightest was a Canon R5C with a single lens, whereas the heaviest setup I put on the slider was a rigged out Canon C70 with a V-mount battery and an external monitor on top, which should come in at around 6 kilograms or 13 pounds. You can tell that when using a heavier camera setup that the entire slider gets a little less stable, but that never really became an issue. And I shot product b-roll on a 100mm macro with the Canon C70 and I didn't really see any less smooth footage. And that has to say something, because on a 100mm focal length, you should see every bump and every instability. If you don't want to attach the slider to either a tripod or light stands, you can also use the included feet. And those are actually pretty sturdy and also height adjustable. With those, you can just take the slider, put it on the floor or onto a table, and that makes for easy shooting everywhere. The slider is powered either via Sony NP-F batteries, or now you can also power it via the USB-C port. So if you're afraid of running out of battery power on your Sony NP-F batteries, you can now just plug it into the wall or use a power bank to power the slider for longer. But let me tell you, a Sony NP-F battery powers this gimbal for a very long time, and I never really had any issues of running out of battery. A lot of people who saw me using the slider on my Instagram stories actually noticed that the slider can be somewhat loud. And yes, that is true, especially if you slide it from left to right on full speed, it does become quite loud as a matter of fact. When setting up a slow loop for an interview, the slider gets noticeably quieter though. So I quickly set up a makeshift interview in my living room just to test it out, and I moved the slider as close to my subject as possible, as I would usually do on a real-world interview shoot. And the slider was so quiet that there is no way that my shotgun microphone would have picked it up by any means. If you want to move the slider very quickly and you want to record audio, especially when you want to record audio on top of your camera, then there's no chance that you will actually do so without picking up a lot of noise from the slider. But me personally, I don't really see a lot of scenarios where I would do this, because the only way that I would use the slider and record audio would be for something like an interview or a scene where I would have some actors. And again, it's quiet enough for this not to become an issue in my opinion. So now let's talk a little bit about the app, and I would highly recommend using the app instead of the onboard systems, because you have so much more control over how your slider functions. The app is still the same as for all of the other micro sliders, and with that app I do have a lot of experience, and I can actually say that I really enjoy using it. It's very easy and quick to connect to your slider and also other accessories, and I've been using the Zeapon Micro 3 with the Pons pan and tilt heads, and like it did before, it works very well, and the app combines everything perfectly together. Within the app you can make very precise movements within your Zeapon Micro 3, and you do so by just moving the thumb wheel to either the left or the right, and the further you drag it out, the faster the slider goes. You can also very easily set keyframes, and you do so by just moving the slider to your assigned start position, then you press the A button, then you move it to wherever you want this keyframe to end, and you press the B button. You can also loop this process, so the slider continuously goes from A to B point and back to the A point. And the one thing I'm missing here in the app is the ability to fade it in and out. Zeapon told me that they implemented a fade out when you only go from A to B, but it doesn't work in loop yet. And this is a feature that I would really like to see in the future, and they told me that they're working on it. Because it still makes a very hard stop, and you will probably see this in your footage, unfortunately. I'm running out of batteries. Hit record again. On top of the slider, Zeapon also sent me their quick release revolver kit, and that comes in very handy if you continuously want to quickly switch from your slider to a tripod, for example. And I use this to take my B-roll camera and switch from slider to my overhead rig, and this makes it a lot easier. So now let's sum it all up. I really do like the Zeapon Micro 3 slider, and this is going to be my go-to slider from now on. It is definitely sturdy enough to use a Canon C70 even rigged up, but I will probably use it with a lighter setup for most of the time. I love that you can detach the motor now and quickly go from a motorized slider to a manual one. I also like that we have more mounting options, that we have a bigger mounting plate, and that the overall slider is just a little bit better built now. The app is still great and easy to use, and this will be my go-to slider for all of my product B-rolls as well as for interview setups from now on. I still wish that we would have a way to fade in and out in loop mode so that I could actually use it more confidently on interview shoots, but for everything else that hasn't become a problem for me. I can definitely highly recommend you check out the link down in the description below and get yourself one as well. I hope you liked my little review, and if you did, then please give this video a thumbs up because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more tech reviews, filmmaking behind the scenes and tutorials, and since you're already here, maybe check out this video because YouTube thinks you might really enjoy it, and I hope to see you on the next one. Cut!